Wish TV. All Indiana Politics
is your premier source for Indiana politics.
Focusing on issues that matter to you.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage, exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders, expert analysis on critical legislation. From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
I'm Garrett Bergquist, government reporter for Wish TV and the producer of All Indiana Politics. Vop Osili has served on the Indianapolis City-County Council for the past 15 years. He spent 8 of them as council president. What most people don't know about him is he's an architect who has designed buildings around the world, including here in Indianapolis. And he spent his early childhood alternating between Haughville on the city's near west side and his father's native country of Nigeria. In this new interview, Osili tells me about the way this upbringing shaped his approach to politics and to life. And joining us now is former Indianapolis City-County Council President Vop Osili. Vop, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks very much, Garrett.
So we're taking a little bit of a different angle with this interview. We're talking about some of the...
Don't let high golf rates drive you out of bounds. Save big with the Wish TV Great Golf Club card.
Central Indiana's largest golf club card membership is back for the 8th season with more courses than ever before. Save over 75% on tee times at 27 Central Indiana golf courses. All you need is the Wish TV Great Golf Club card. Cards are valid for the entire 2026 golf season.
Great courses, great savings. Score your Great Golf Club card today.
Central Indiana. Wish TV is now live on YouTube TV and Hulu Live, offering more hours of local programming than any other station. Search for Wish TV or look for CW8 on both YouTube TV and Hulu Live to find us. Watch local news, sports, and lifestyle shows live from Wish TV. You can still catch Wish TV free over the air or stream it live on wishtv.com and on the free Wish TV mobile apps. Wish TV, available in more places for the latest news, weather, and sports.
forces that shaped the various political figures at the local and possibly also state and federal levels here in Indiana. So tell me a little bit about your upbringing.
All right. Well, my mom, who passed away about 3 years ago, grew up on the west side of the city, 10th and Pershing, in Haughville. She came from a family that came out of Kentucky like 4 or 5 generations ago. Her mother, though, came from North Carolina. My grandparents met when my grandmother actually came up for a visit to visit her uncle, who at the time was a minister of Witherspoon Presbyterian. So his name was Jonathan Bryce. And just so happened that my grandfather lived next door, and they saw something that they liked in each other. And the next thing you knew, they were married, and a few years later, there came my mother. My father came from Nigeria. He'd heard about Purdue University and wanted to be a civil engineer, and found a way to come to America. My mom at the time was up at Purdue University, and there weren't a lot of folks up in Purdue University who looked like them. So they were pretty easy to identify, get to know, and they eventually met, married, and my dad and my mom both finished. They got their masters, and my father worked for a few years with the State Department, the Department of Transportation at the time, and my mother worked in the welfare office here in Indianapolis, working with kids. My mother was a clinical psychologist, a child psychologist, both actually. They married, had a sister that was born here, and my father decided he wanted to go back to Nigeria. My mother had agreed, and they moved back to Nigeria. I have another sister who was born there, and then I was born there. A few years later, Nigeria had a military coup. And following that was a desire to separate as a country. And a civil war started. My father's folks came from one side, which was trying to secede from the rest of Nigeria. And he determined that he wanted to stay and be a part of that. My mother, on the other hand, said no. that being in the Civil War was not something she had banked on. And with 3 children, if he wanted to stay, that would not be, the direction that she was going to take. And so she called her parents and told them that she was coming home. And she brought us back with her. And so I spent my early childhood in the home of my grandparents on the west side, the home that she grew up in. Ended up going to IPS, went to school 26. Actually, I started at Christian Morehouse for preschool through the Head Start program. And then went to 26 on the east side, where my mother's sister was a music teacher. I think she was a music teacher there for like 30 years. Sort of fast forward, I am an architect by training. Went to Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. After graduation, I came back to Indianapolis. Worked for an amazing architect by the name of Walter Blackburn. And he passed away back in 2000, but his widow, Alpha Blackburn, who actually, I believe, had a program on Channel 8, an interview program on Channel 8 that was very, very popular when I was a kid. Went back to grad school at Columbia University in New York, and then came back, worked for Walter a couple more years, and then decided to go out on my own. And first major project, actually, I got the opportunity to do was for a man by the name of Sam Jones, who was a longtime president of the Indianapolis Urban League. And he gave me an opportunity, which I think was an example for me, that you give, our young folks an opportunity, to branch out in their careers. And he could have given it to anybody, the opportunity there. But it got me that chance to put something in the ground and something that was significant. And so first major project, and that led to a number of other things, a number of other projects. But I think the crowning point for me was, in terms of, or I should say the starting point for me in terms of the politics, was Mrs. Julia Carson asked me to do some work in her home, to do some renovation in her home. And that was really significant because it then gave me sort of a front seat view of our local politics. And she was an amazing lady who loved her city, loved her community, loved the people that she represented. And she passed that on to me, a real passion to do the work, not just to hold a position, but to actually utilize it, to do something that made a difference in people's lives. And I don't know if that helps at all, but it's how it all kind of got started. She told me, this is what I'm thinking I want to see you do. And even after she passed, I never forgot that.
There's all kinds of jumping off points there. A little bit of a personal connection here. You said one of your grandparents was from North Carolina?
Yes, my grandmother.
Okay, what part of North Carolina?
Henderson, in Vance County.
I believe I went out that direction a couple times. I worked in Raleigh, North Carolina for 2.5 years before I came out here. So
yeah,
I was just curious about this. So how did your dad first hear about Purdue? How did he settle on Purdue?
So he told me that someone had given him a book, someone who knew that he was interested in civil engineering when he was in high school. He was a very, very excellent student. And there was some engineering manual or some engineering book that had Purdue in it. My father devoured it. It had to do with, I think, his specialty was soils. And it touched him in some manner. I think that the professor's name was McLaughlin. Either he was the author of that or someone my father met, a professor my father met when he first got here. But he was determined. Nigeria was a British colony at the time, and a number of people who were growing up with my father, if they had the opportunity to go overseas, were going to England. My father knew that they were going to be doing something with this sort of interstate system, and he thought, if I can get to America, I can learn about these things because this is a big deal. And so that's how he ended up with this great desire to go to Purdue in America.
Yeah. And then So your mom grew up in Haughville, and you said you spent some years growing up in your grandparents' house in Haughville. Tell me a little bit about that.
I think the best part about that, my grandparents didn't have money, but they had pride. My grandfather was a plumber. He worked at Lockfield Gardens for many years. And my grandmother was a IPS substitute teacher. The best part about it was my grandfather's, sisters and brother were incredibly close. And so there were always folks coming in from the family. But even maybe more memorable was the neighbors that we had around us. And this sense of, we may not have a lot, but what we have, we're going to take care of. And we're proud that we're able to maintain it. Miss Sweatman, who lived just to the south of us, had roses as big as my head. At least that's how it felt when I was a kid. There was just, her flower bed was immaculate. My grandmother did not play about weeds. A weed could not survive. It just could not. It was not allowed. Miss Dice across the street, she was a lady who used to take out the splinters in my feet because I was always running around barefoot. I didn't really like her all that much because I just associated her with a lot of pain. And then we had the Westbrooks just right to the north of us. But there was a section on the sort of the southern end of this 1000 block of Pershing that just always felt secure and safe. And it's the pride part, I think, and the dignity that I remember most, because it's impacted how I look at neighborhoods now. And when I see things that could disrupt a neighborhood, it takes me back to this notion that every neighborhood, every community needs to have this level of security and pride and the dignity that comes with that. And then how do we make sure that that continues going forward? How can they have that same thing, that sense of, this is mine, I'm going to take care of it? I've shared with a number of folks that the very last time I saw my grandfather alive, on the morning that he died, was him sweeping in front of our house, sweeping the sidewalk. And it wasn't because anybody was looking, it was because this is my house. I'm proud of it, and it's going to be a showpiece on this block. So, with him already being good with his hands as a plumber, the picket fence was always painted. The windows were always painted. The screen porch was, you never find a hole in it. The latches always worked. I mean, it was a great showpiece, and it gave me a lot of pride, and a pride in a home and a security in a home that I carry with me even today when I think about what work I can do on behalf of our neighborhoods.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that, because you have your immediate family growing up there in Haughville, but you also have your neighbors that you're interacting with, and tell me a little bit more about those bonds that you formed early on. Those were bonds that you maintained throughout your life, right?
So, yeah, absolutely. The bonds were the things I think I will remember the most. Now, my grandparents were, as you can imagine, they were very disciplined people, and they were also very strict. My bike riding permissions went from 10th Street to 11th Street and then back. But that was okay, because there were a few other kids that at least could stop by. And then the bonds actually also went to my high school friends. My grade school friends who were at 26. One of whom right now is Washington Township Constable. So it's sort of nice to sort of see my peers from the time I was 4 and 5 and 6. And then one who just recently passed away, God rest his soul, Dennis Hayes. We were at 26 together. Those things stick with you, and they matter. And I'm grateful to God for them.
I want to go back to your parents for just a moment. So those first couple of years of your life, you were growing up in Nigeria a little bit. Do you have any memories of that, or is that still kind of too early?
The memories that I do have are only leaving. I mean, those are the ones that I remember, because the country was at war. And when my mother made the determination that she was coming home, there is just a memory of, I think, the pain of that, the memory of the night that we left the country, the difficulty of getting on the plane. You know, there was some shenanigans with, I think, our tickets, and my mother had to get someone from the American embassy to get us on the plane, to walk us onto the plane when they finally got us to the airport. I remember the ride to the airport, actually, because it was a formal ride with someone with the embassy. And there were so many people trying to leave the country at the time. And then learning later on that my mother was only allowed to leave the country with $700 is difficult to imagine now, how she must have felt going home, not having a place of her own, but having to move in with her parents with her own 3 children, not having a job lined up, not having money for the foreseeable future. There was something that still, she never spoke about it, but that memory is of a lot of uncertainty, and yet she was able to overcome that to make us feel that all would be well. My grandparents, I mean, God bless them, the way that they always made us feel like any place that is ours is yours. Those early weeks and months are more vivid than my time in Nigeria. Just, I think, because of the whole shake-up of the newness of a new environment. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me about, how did growing up with one parent who was a naturalized citizen, one parent who was born and raised in the United States?
Well, my father was never a naturalized citizen.
Okay.
No, he never changed his citizenship.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more, though, about what that was like with one parent who is a U.S. citizen, one who is an immigrant. You kind of have a foot in each world there. Tell me a little bit more about how that shaped you.
Well, the other part is, my father came over for education, and he was really clear with my mother that he always intended to go back to Nigeria to take his education and to do something with Nigeria. Nigeria was still a British colony, but it was soon to emerge with its independence, and he wanted to be there when that happened. So I didn't see my father for 5 years, which by itself is pretty difficult, because we didn't know whether he was alive or dead. There would be word now and then. My mother used to do something really incredibly special, just to make sure that we never forgot about my father. And whatever happened between them and the separation, she didn't share. But birthday cards or other kinds of cards would always be signed, love, Mom and Dad. Which, as a kid, I always wondered, how did he sign it? But yet he didn't stick around to give it to me, do you know? But it was her way of making sure that I didn't forget. So in those years, I didn't have very much memory of my father. My mother was it, but she made sure that we didn't forget that we had a father.
Take me through your high school and college years.
So my parents reconciled some years later. And My mother did something that I think was difficult. I don't think it was difficult. I know it was difficult. That a lot of other foreign wives of Nigerians did not do. And it was when they reconciled, she decided to rejoin him. And in later years, she explained it that I wanted my children to have a father. And as I said, a number of the people that she had known there before the war who were foreign from any number of countries, because Nigerians had been to a number of countries to get their higher education, never returned. When the war happened and their husbands decided to stay, they just refused to go back. So I ended up going back, and I finished high school there. I graduated a bit early, and I'm one of the few people I know who's graduated from high school twice. So I graduated there, and then my parents sent me back to America, sent me back here, and I did a year of high school in New Hampshire, and then went on to college.
Tell me a little bit more about that. So you go through that. You're basically going through two educational systems in Nigeria and the United States. You're kind of going back and forth there. I guess what were kind of some of the biggest life lessons that came out of that?
That you got to be your own counsel. That you got to learn that it's okay if you're alone. It builds a real strength of. It builds a resilience that, because there had been so much movement, the one constant was yourself, and you don't necessarily need anyone else's approval. You can stand strong on your own. I couldn't have articulated it then, but I can look back and see that that's where that has led me even today. That certain things that I've done and decisions that I've taken and political moves that I've made are not based on approvals of others, but because I felt that they were the right things to do. And God help, and God bless both my parents. They stuck to their convictions on the things that they believed. And my father's decision not to leave, my father's decision that he wanted his family, to be reunited. My mother's resolve that even though he had stayed, decided not to come to America, that she would reconcile, and the resolve that her children would know their father. My parents had a lot of integrity and a lot of grit, and it's something I'm grateful to see as an example, because those were hard decisions. Those were decisions of emotion, that involved emotions, that involved pride and ego, that they were able to suppress or put out or just kill with a greater vision for what the future could look like, what a better future could look like if those sort of personal things were better addressed. And those aren't always discussed, but you somehow symbiotically, you get to understand that it is right to act on your conviction. My father would say this. This is one thing I do remember, very clearly. If you make a mistake, correct it, but never waffle. So take a decision was his thing. Take a decision. If it's a wrong one, correct it, and keep moving forward. Once again, it didn't mean anything as a young person. It means a lot now. It does help to keep you on the path that your conviction has led you to.
Well, Vop, thank you for coming in today. Already an interesting conversation. Can't wait to continue this next time.
I appreciate the time, Garrett. Thank you.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.